Okay, guys. So welcome to our first lecture on Zoom. Let's just hope that this turns out as good as everybody hopes it will. So in our class, we have already talked about, the generalities of health and disease. And also we went through the respiratory system. And then we had Dr. Timony talk about, a few of like EVA and CEM, which can be EVA respiratory, and then can also be a reproductive problem, as well as CEM is a reproduction kind of problem. And then he talked about the international spread of disease and how horses can be affected. So now we're going to talk about the neurologic system, okay? So let me share with you here the PowerPoint. So the PowerPoint that we're going to have is called, I think, the nervous system. Let's do this guy here, and here we go. So the nervous system is divided into, hold on just a second, because I have my stylus pens here. You guys are going to have to see this. But we also have this guy. Her name is Jolene, and she's trying to play with my pens. So she may be a problem, and she also has a hedgehog that's her friend. So the hedgehog is just a plush animal, so she is not real. Okay, so give me my pens. The nervous system is divided into two branches. Okay, we have the central nervous system, which is made up of the brain and also the spinal cord. Let me see if I can try to do nope. The brain and the spinal cord, okay? And then we have the peripheral nervous system. The peripheral nervous system is the nerves, okay? So we have, in the peripheral nervous system, we have the nerves that generally come out of the spinal cord. And then in the peripheral nervous system, it's still further divided between the somatic, okay, or voluntary nervous system, and then we have the autonomic or the involuntary nervous system, okay? And we're going to see this a little bit more in the next slide. But the brain is divided between different hemispheres, okay? We have parts of the brain that are going to control different parts of the body, okay? We have the gray matter in the brain that is on the outside, and then we have the white part of the brain, which is the inside of the brain. In the spinal cord, this gets the opposite. So we have the white outside and the gray matter inside, okay? The neocortex, which is the outer gray matter, is going to deal with memory and consciousness. And then we also have the olfactory bulb, which is also on the forebrain. If you guys see here, this is a horse's brain. The olfactory bulb would be in the forebrain, okay? Then we have the midbrain, which is going to deal with visual, auditory, and also olfactory information. And the midbrain is going to control the hindbrain sensors. The hindbrain, which is the oldest part of the brain, it is what is going to control motor activities, breathing, and things that are needed for you to survive. So I watched one time, I think it was on, I think Snapped, or, hold on. I think I watched on Snapped or one of those programs that people kill other people. And I don't know if you guys remember that, but it was this guy that went home and killed his parents. And I know this is a little bit macabre, but it's just interesting because he went with an axe and hit his dad in multiple places. And the next day, his father woke up, was able to do everything, like got out of bed, got the paper, did everything routinely that he used to do. And then he fell over dead, obviously. But what happened is the part of the brain that was left intact is this part that is continuously doing everything. So breathing and also things that he has done for the last 65 years of his life. He continued to do that, and that wasn't affected. So I thought that was really, really interesting. So that's what happened. So the hindbrain, this is what is going to happen, okay? How do I go to the next slide? There we go. So this is just showing here the cerebellum. So this is in the back part of the brain. And the cerebellum, I talked about the olfactory bulbs, they're right here in the front. The cerebellum is going to deal with balance and equilibrium, okay? And then we have here the spinal cord, okay? There is a medulla oblongata, which is right after the brain ends and the spinal cord starts. And the medulla oblongata, there isn't a true definition of where it starts and where it ends, okay? And then we're gonna have here spinal nerves, okay? So in between each vertebrae, okay, starting from the cervical vertebrae, when each vertebrae meets the other one, there's going to be spinal nerves that come out. And this is the next slide, and it's showing the optic chiasm, which is this guy here. There's an X here. This is on the underside of the brain. So this is the ventral side of the brain right here. And we have in the head, in the brain, we have the 12 cranial nerves. Do I have to memorize the 12 cranial nerves? Not really, but they are very, very, very important nerves, okay? So here are the 12 spinal nerves. It's just important that you guys understand that some of the nerves are sensory and some of the nerves are motor nerves, such as the oculomotor is the nerve that's going to make the eye move. And the optic nerve is a sensory. It's the nerve that is behind the eyeball that gathers information to then make the vision of the person, so the person or horse or dog or whatever is able to see. So that's sensory, okay? And then we have the oculomotor, which makes the eyeball actually move, okay? Then we're going to have mixed nerves, okay, such as the facial nerve. It can actually have the feeling of sensation as well as moving some of the muscles of the face. And then if you guys remember, we talked about the vagus nerve, which is right here. And the vagus nerve, if you guys remember that, I said that it was a cholinergic nerve. It's a very, very long nerve, cholinergic nerve, that passes on the left side of the esophagus all the way through, and also is the nerve that is going to control heart rate. Do you guys remember that? And then the other nerve that I thought was interesting is the trigeminal nerve. If you guys remember, there is a virus that hides in the trigeminal nerve. Which virus is this? Okay, so if you guys, I hope you guys can remember that one. It's one of the viruses that we have studied before, okay? So the spinal cord is made up of bundles of fibers. It's like a highway of information, okay? And we are going to, it's like a highway that takes information to the brain and brings information from the brain to the rest of the body. And it is the link between the brain and the peripheral nervous system, which, as we talked about, is innervated by the nerves. There is no, we talked about, there's no clear demarcation between the medulla oblongata and the spinal cord, but we talk about the spinal cord as starting in the foramen magnum. If you guys remember in anatomy, the big hole in the occipital bone that the spinal cord starts there and ends at the sacrum. The left hemisphere of the brain is going to control movement on the right side, and the right hemisphere is going to control movement on the left side. So we already know about that. And then in between the brain and, say, the spinal cord and the bone structure that houses them, okay, so if you guys think about this, the cranium is this bony structure that houses the brain. The brain is very important, so the cranium is extremely hard, okay? It's made of very, very flat and very hard, immovable bones, okay, that get together without moving. And in between the brain and the cranium, or the spinal cord and the spinal and the vertebral spine, there's going to be what we call cerebral spinal fluid, or CSF, okay? The CSF is going to provide nutrients, okay? And also it's a little liquid that when it gets inflamed, we are able to tap the spine of the horse or the person to be able to figure out what is going on. So that fluid is very, very important. It also allows for nutrients to be delivered to the central nervous system. Okay, there's going to be 3 layers of meninges. The meninges are the tissues that cover the brain and spinal cord. We're going to have the dura mater. The dura mater is going to be the outermost meninx, and then we're going to have the arachnoid, which is the middle of them, and then we're going to have the pia mater. The pia mater is going to be the very thin little tissue that is the one covering the brain and covering the spinal cord. Okay, so here we have a transection of the spinal column, and we have here the space. This space here is where the CSF is. Okay, and we're going to have here the dura mater, the arachnoid, and then the pia mater is this guy right here. Okay, which is the one that involves the brain and the spinal cord. And then when we need to collect what? When we need to collect the CSF, we need to be able to tap all the way into here to be able to get the liquid. Okay. This is the epidural space. Epi means close. Okay. So it's the space that is close to the dura mater. That's why it's called epi, close, dural space. Okay. And this is where anesthetics are put on. For example, to give birth, we get an epidural anesthesia. So the anesthetics are put down here, and then they are able to anesthetize the area. Okay. This is just showing how the nerves in between each one of the vertebrae, there is going to be innervation, and this is also showing the ribs. Okay. There's going to be innervation coming out from where the nerves are going to what? To innervate the rest of the body. Okay, so I'm trying here to, I'm gonna try to share now a whiteboard so I can write something. Let's see if I can do that. Okay, so I can. So here's the thing. Here's one of the things that is important for us to understand. So we have here the brain, okay? And then we have the spinal cord, okay? Can I write with this? No. The brain and the spinal cord, they are part of the CNS, central nervous system, okay? Nerves, there's nerves coming out here. We're going to have motor nerves and we're going to have sensory nerves. Okay, sensory nerves, they are called efferent nerves. Ooh, doesn't fit. Efferent nerves, and they take, so sensory nerves, okay, and they take information from the body and take it to the brain. Okay, and then we have motor nerves. They are efferent nerves, and they take information from the brain into the nerve and into the muscle or tissue. Okay, what is the importance of that? The importance of that is that the sensory nerve, and we talked about that. Let me stop sharing here so you guys can see me. So the sensory nerves, they're going to get information, say from the tips of your, say you touch a hot pot. It is the sensory nerve that gets that information from the tip of your finger, travels all the way to the arm in split second, goes to the brain and says, this is hot, it's going to hurt. And it is the motor nerve that sends the information from the brain to the spinal cord and to this nerve here to say, to the motor nerve here saying, remove your hand. And it's the motor nerve that allows that contracts the muscle and makes the muscle remove the hand to where the injury is supposed to be happening. Okay, so that is extremely important for us to understand. Let me share now the PowerPoint. Okay, What am I talking about here? So in the peripheral nervous system, we're going to have the somatic or voluntary nervous system, and then also the autonomic or involuntary nervous system. And this is exactly what I have just talked about, is that we are going to have sensory nerves and motor nerves that we already talked about that. What is important for you guys to understand is this other further division of the peripheral nervous system. Let me try to draw that for you. Let me see how that goes. How the heck do I clear? Here, clear that. Okay, clear all drawings. There we go. Okay, so what is important for us to understand is this. So we have the central nervous system, which is comprised of brain and spinal cord, okay? And then we have the peripheral nervous system, which is what? The nerves, okay? Nerves. The peripheral nervous system is then subdivided into somatic and autonomic. The somatic nervous system is what? Voluntary. Voluntary. And it's voluntary because it is the muscles, the striated muscles, which is the skeletal muscles, and it is the we want to move our legs, we want to move our arms. It is somatic, it's voluntary, it's something that we make the decision consciously, okay? The autonomic nervous system is then, it's called also involuntary, hold on, involuntary, okay? And it is subdivided into what? Sympathetic and parasympathetic. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to clear this this whiteboard here, and we're going to start from the sympathetic and parasympathetic. So I hope you guys got that, okay? Clear all drawings. So we're going to have here sympathetic and parasympathetic, okay? The sympathetic is the fight or flight response, okay? And it is the hormone that regulates this is epinephrine. Epinephrine used to be called adrenaline. And it is what gives increases the heart rate, increases the respiratory rate. It locks down any kind of basal, such as the GI tract. It doesn't allow you to actually go to the bathroom and pee and poop as you're trying to run from your enemy. Does that make sense? After that discharge happens and things have calmed down, that's when an animal or a person will have diarrhea or urination, etc. Okay, so ideally, this is how generally that goes. So the sympathetic is controlled by epinephrine, and it is the fight or flight response. The parasympathetic, the hormone is called acetylcholine. We already talked about this in class. And the acetylcholine, and it is going to be responsible for the basal parts of our body, such as digestion. We don't think about digestion. It just happens, okay? So basal heart rate, basal respiration, anything that it's part of, obviously, of the autonomic nervous system. So it's not something that we have to think about. It just happens because this is how the body works, okay? As opposed to the somatic that you actually have to make it work, okay? So parasympathetic is acetylcholine, and it is the basal kinds of responses, okay? Let me now share back again the PowerPoint. Where are you? Okay. And this is exactly what we have talked about here, okay? So we have the spinal nerves. There's going to be in between each one of when the two vertebrae gather together, there's going to be nerves coming out, okay, every single place. Then there's going to be two main plexi. One is the brachial plexus, which is right behind the scapula of the horse. Okay, so this is it's behind, right behind where the scapula of the horse actually is, and it comes in front of the humerus right here, and it has a lot of innervation to the front leg of the horse. That's called the brachial plexus. Okay, it's a very important group of nerves that are responsible for the movement of the front leg. And then we have the lumbosacral plexus, which comes out of the sacrum, and it is in the lumbar vertebrae, and it innervates the hind leg. So that's also a very, very important group of nerves. So this is what we have to know about the introduction for the nervous system. And then we're going to talk about different diseases and how they affect the nervous system. If you have any questions, send me an email. Bye.